Hey guys, I am Christy Yoder, and I am the founder of both pages on Facebook called Whole Self Health and Finding Freedom. I also have an intuitive eating group for Christian women, and I am here today with our friend Char-Lee, and she is a registered dietitian who has been following intuitive eating for about 6 years. So I get a lot of questions in my group, and usually I can answer them really well. I got one recently that was asking about how to deal with a spouse or significant other that is not on board with your intuitive eating and not on board with the same goals that you are with or have. And that isn't something that I have dealt with. My husband is fine with like me at any size and is cool with my intuitive eating. But Char-Lee, I know, has had some experience just with some a little bit of conflict in that area as she was going into this intuitive eating process. And so I wanted her to give us her thoughts on this. And the question that I got, Char-Lee, from somebody was something like, and it was a couple months ago actually, so I'm just going to kind of paraphrase, but it was something like, you know, I'm doing intuitive eating, but I've gained some weight as I'm trying to make peace with food, and my husband is like not cool with it. He's not cool with my weight gain, and he thinks I should be a certain size. And when we got married, I was this certain size, and we both worked out together, and it was a big part of our lives, and dieting and nutrition was a big part of our lives. And now, you know, I'm not doing that, but he's not on board with that. So what do I do? So Char-Lee has some really good advice for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so to give you a little bit of my backstory, my husband and I were introduced by a mutual friend who was just 100% positive that we were soulmates because we were both obsessed with diet and exercise. So our first conversation was about like certain weightlifting techniques we were using. And I mean, that's how we bonded. Our relationship was born and grew in the gym. And I, bless his heart, I took him on all kinds of dieting journeys with me as I was going to school as I was preparing to go to school to be a dietitian. And then in the beginning of my schooling, I took him through all the fad diets that you can think of, swearing that it was the right way and the right thing to do. And then my eyes were opened a little bit to intuitive eating, and I saw how much the dieting was really harming me, and I started learning about intuitive eating. And I started walking closer with the Lord during this time, and I just really started changing, embracing intuitive eating. And that was really hard for us because I was really changing our lifestyle on my side. At the same time that I started learning about intuitive eating, I started having, before that, I started having really bad joint pain, and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And so I physically couldn't go to the gym like we were anymore and do the things that we were doing. And my body hurt, and I was learning intuitive eating. I was like, and I was walking with the Lord, and all this stuff was happening that was really separating us. I wasn't going to the gym anymore. We weren't spending that time together. And I had a lot of fear of losing him because of that. I had tons of fear of what's going to happen if I get fat or I'm not fit. I can't do these things anymore. He's going to lose respect for me. He's not going to find me attractive anymore. And I think he at the same time was kind of like, what happened to my wife? We were doing all these things together, and like these were our morals and values, and now those are shifting for her, and this is weird, and I don't know what to expect. So that was my beginning of intuitive eating. And so I think it all starts with having open and honest conversations about what's going on.
Absolutely.
And we all know that, oh boy, that's easier said than done because emotions are high and there's a lot at stake. It feels like there's so much at stake. And so,
well, you know, and in our culture, right? Like we're just so, we hold on so tight to our dieting morality, really.
Absolutely.
So it's like, if you start talking about losing that, like that grip you have on dieting and being able to change your body, like that's huge for people, and people don't want to hear that message. Like they really have to be ready to hear that message to accept it. And so if your spouse isn't.
Yes. Well, I mean, we get our worth and our values so wrapped up in our diet and exercise behaviors, our identity. We think that that's who we are. We think that we can control our lives by controlling what we eat and how we exercise.
Yep.
So for someone to be saying, nope, I'm not going to do those things anymore. It's like, what? Like, how are you going to you're not going to have control anymore? And you're,
right.
let yourself go. And what, like, you're questioning my identity and where I get my purpose. What?
Right. Yeah. It's like an attack on them. Like, even if you don't care, like what they do, they feel attacked. And I think anybody, not even just your spouse, it could be a friend, it could be some other family member. But as soon as you mention, like, I'm not dieting anymore, it's like, people think you're attacking them. And it's like, well, no, it's what I'm choosing for me. And, I have to like take care of my mental health at this point, and that's just not helping.
Yes.
People get attacked.
Yes. And so basically what we're saying, Christy, is that people take dieting and exercise and they worship it.
Yep.
It becomes an idol in your life.
Huge. And it's this sneaky one. Like it's almost like it's okay in America, and even in American churches.
Yes.
Or Western culture in general, it's okay.
Yes, because it's a positive thing to want to take care of your health. It's a positive thing to want to exercise and eat well and nourish your body, right? That's positive.
Yes. We could go so many different directions with that, right?
But then Satan takes that and just like, oh, okay, then get obsessed with it and just focus on that and worship this health and worship this ideal body. And it really becomes this really unhealthy thing that we are focusing on. And when we are confronted with that, right? So when a friend says, hey, read intuitive eating, or, in some way you start to realize like, whoa, maybe my relationship with food and exercise like isn't super great, or we're confronted with that. Like either we get super defensive of our behaviors and our food and exercise behaviors. I know I did the first time someone said, hey, you should read intuitive eating. I was like, you're saying that, I have a disordered relationship with food, and I was very offended. So the people around you might be, when you're spreading that message, your spouse could be, and, or you might then we kind of go through this phase where we try and have both worlds. Like we try to break free from that, but
and it doesn't work.
Yes.
It just doesn't work. I mean, then you're even more conflicted in your head. I mean, you can't really fully embrace intuitive eating, but you don't want to diet anymore. And now you're like in this like middle ground, and it's hard. That's a hard spot to be in. I think a lot of people end up in that spot.
Yeah. And I think for me, like really recognizing that, wow, like this diet and exercise obsession is idolatry, and idolatry is sin.
Right.
And so I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to try and be in both worlds. I want to walk away from this. I want to get real and change. I'm ready. But then your spouse is saying, I'm not ready. I like exercising. I like being in trying to control my world with diet culture. And so you need to recognize that this change in your heart that really the Lord is putting inside of you and working on you with can be really intimidating and frustrating to your people, to your spouse, to your partner. I mean, whoever it is.
Yes.
If you're saying, well, I think my relationship with food was kind of disordered and unhealthy, but that's their relationship with food.
Yeah.
Or you're saying, I really recognize a problem with this and I want to change, but they're not ready to change.
Right.
So you have to recognize that and you have to talk about it, and you got to be gentle. Like you can't force them to change.
No.
right?
No.
You can't nag them and beat them into following along with you. But
Which
you
is really
also,
like, it's like any conviction that we would have on anything. Like, I mean, you know, like just because I'm convicted that I need to read my Bible for 30 minutes a day in the morning before I leave my room doesn't mean that my spouse has to embrace it exactly the same way. Um,
yes,
so what's important to me, like I need to do what's important for me, but you still have that, like, so when we start intuitive eating and people, if you've come from that dieting background and you've really been controlling your food intake or exercising to control your body size, you know, when we jump into intuitive eating from that, we've been artificially controlling everything. And as we start to make peace with food, one of the intuitive eating principles, I mean, that can, you're very often going to gain weight in that stage, in that honeymoon stage of intuitive eating. If you've been restricting, you're going to gain weight. And so that can feel super uncomfortable in general, just for your own personhood. So, but then when your husband or your boyfriend or whatever is like not really on board with you gaining weight, so what do you do there? You go, okay, well, you're not on board and this is my thing, but now so then what?
yeah. So, oh,
And
I'm gonna
there's not a perfect answer, right? I mean, you can,
oh, there's absolutely not a perfect answer.
except for
Um,
like pray.
who, but I'm gonna dig in real deep here.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
it has been
Because
so helpful for me.
yeah.
And you might feel like I'm going on a tangent for a minute, but I promise you, I'm bringing it
Okay.
back. I'm bringing it back to accepting your weight
Okay.
when you're making peace with food, even if your husband isn't quite there yet. Okay.
Okay. I'm so excited to hear this.
So, my husband believes in God, but he has not accepted Jesus as his personal savior. So, when I'm talking to you about working through changes with intuitive eating and all of that, like know that that has also been like working through like God completely flipping my life upside down and my husband going like, what? Because he's not there yet. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out, how do I honor my husband? How do I keep this marriage positive? How I do all these things when I'm saved and he's not, and we have differing opinions on a lot of things. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm brought to 1 Peter 3. I think it's 1 through 6 that I'm going to talk about. And this is talking about, so people quote this for all kinds of reasons, but it says, in the same way, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that even if some disobey the Christian message, which is used to say that they don't accept the gospel, okay, they're not saved. They disobey the Christian message. But I think you could also say like that they're not following through with the Christian faith. So submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that even if some disobey the Christian message, they may be won over without a message by the way their wives live when they observe our pure and reverent lives. So I take that to like, honor your husband, be respectful and loving, so that he sees how much Christ has changed you, and he will have that desire. You don't have to nag him, right? Like that's how I like, don't nag him, just respect and honor him.
Yeah.
So
Trust me. Yeah.
this is where you're going to be like, oh my gosh, because I was like, oh my gosh. It says, your beauty should not consist of outward things like elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold ornaments or fine clothes. Instead, it should consist of what is inside the heart, with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very valuable in God's eyes. For in the past, the holy women who put their hope in God also beautified themselves in this way, submitting to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. You have become her children, and you do what is good and are not frightened by anything alarming. Mm-hmm. So he's saying, even like if your husband is not saved, don't get yourself wrapped up in trying to win him with your beauty. Your beauty should not consist of outward things like your weight and, you know, all of these kinds of things that our culture says that's how you win your husband.
Right.
But God says, no, 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 no. You are going to win your husband by honoring him and respecting him, by walking with the Lord and letting the Holy Spirit change you into a gentle and quiet and loving spirit.
Yeah. And, you know, I think, and I've heard this from somebody, she was like, well, I feel like, you know, if I'm honoring and respecting him, then I should look how he wants me to look. But I mean, those verses basically say, no, like, I mean, if your husband's telling you that, he's wrong.
Yes.
He's wrong. Like, you can show him these verses. Like,
yes. And that's what, if your husband is a Christian,
right.
Oh my goodness, because you can show him, look, my disordered relationship with food and exercise is sin. Like, this is idolatry, and I'm not walking in that sin any longer. I won't. You know, I want to move away from this.
Yes.
Submitting to your husband means treating him with respect and honoring him, not slandering him or talking bad about him in front of other people. It means following him when he's leading, but it does not mean following your husband into sin.
Absolutely. Yes.
God is who we submit to first.
Right.
Like, he is our first leader. We follow him, and then we follow our husband.
I think too, we have to understand that intuitive eating isn't like this, you know, 3-month or 6-month program that we're just going to like, everything's going to be fixed in 6 months, kind of like it is with dieting, right? Except for then you have to do another one. But
Yes.
It's this journey. And so it's not all going to be, you know, this won't be an issue forever. You know, like we move on. There's different parts of this journey, and this will be something you get through. And really, you and I talked before about this as well. But I mean, if that's something, if your husband and you are really struggling over this and you can't seem to come to an agreement, like, it's time to get counseling probably. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, a lot of churches, like our church has biblical counselors right in the church that we don't pay anything to see them. There are, you know, biblical counseling centers, or, you know, insurance cover stuff, even if they don't. But I mean, it might be time for some therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, what we are also assuming in this conversation is that you are in a healthy, safe relationship.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
So, if you're in a relationship that's safe, that you're not being abused, and you can talk about these things, talk about and work through it, right? But if it's an abusive situation, that's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, we're not talking to that person.
Yeah.
That is a whole different conversation. Yeah.
But I feel like some people can be like, man, like, you're just talking about like how to eat, and you just went like full on like Bible and following the Lord and sin and all this stuff. And it's, yes.
Yeah, because it's totally wrapped up. I mean, for a Christian woman,
like when we're talking about health, that's what we're talking. Like, this is where health comes from. Like, health starts with the word inside our spirits, in our hearts, and works its way out through our bodies.
It does.
And it looks so different than what the world views as health and food and exercise and all of those things. And this journey is going to be kind of ugly. And you might feel like you are out in the wilderness, like your husband's not getting you, you're gaining weight, your body feels weird, you know, all of this stuff that's happening. It does not line up with what the world says like success of becoming healthy would look like.
I think it goes back to, like, we've defined healthy as, you know, it looks a certain way. That, and I just posted this on Finding Freedom earlier this week, that like somehow our body reflects our character.
Yes.
But it doesn't. Like, there are, and intuitive eating isn't anti-health. No. I think in that first honeymoon phase where you're making peace with food and you're like, I can eat anything, it doesn't really feel healthy. Yes. Right? Like, I mean, you're not eating a ton of nutrient-dense foods. You are eating a lot of the sugary foods that you've deprived yourself of for sometimes like 20 or more years. I mean,
yeah, you're having a biological response to the deprivation.
Right,
Which
right.
I
But it
think is
doesn't,
always so important to point out. Like, it's a
yeah,
biological response to depriving yourself. So actually, you're really experiencing the effects of years of dieting, of
yep,
restriction.
absolutely. Right, yeah.
So I have been practicing intuitive eating for about 6 years. And I'm
Yes.
still practicing intuitive eating. Like, it's not something that like I just did and was cool, like was fixed, you know. It's something that has developed over time, and my intuitive eating skills get a little bit better, and I learn different things in different areas, and sometimes they start to fall away in new seasons of life, and I have to come back to and like relearn something. It's the same thing like walking with the Lord. You got
Right.
to stay in it. You got to keep practicing. You got to keep moving forward. It's a slow process. You don't just accept Jesus as your savior and like, boom, you're transformed. You're this new, everything's perfect,
Right.
right? It's
Yeah,
like
it's sanctification. I mean, there's a process. It's a lifelong process.
he works on you your
Yeah,
whole life, and
yeah,
learning intuitive eating, learning how to live this more, because intuitive eating, like, it might start with just your food, but it moves out into every area of your life, right? You start to live more intuitively. All of that stuff comes with time, and that's really hard when you have been dieting and listening to the promises of lose this amount of weight in this short amount of time, like everything, like you'll get it right now. You're not going to get everything you want right now.
right. And if we somehow moved out of our diet culture and into like, a private island where there was no, no American culture, I mean, it might be easier, but I think it maybe it would be a quick process, a 1-2 year process, if we
Yeah.
weren't in our culture that's so, it's not even a culture obsessed with dieting. It's like a diet culture. Like our whole culture revolves around like being
Yes.
thinner. Um, but it's this continuous process because we are so used to just hearing these messages all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, this week alone, I like to watch the Today Show a little bit in the morning. Holy crap, don't listen to that like around the new
Yeah.
year, because there's multiple segments on dieting and exercise, and it's just, and then your news feed on Facebook is filled with stuff, and Instagram, and so it has to be this continuous journey. And I can see how you're like, hey, you might fall away from the principles because we are bombarded with a different message, and so you have to remind yourself constantly. But like I want to go back to that, like it's not anti-health, and I think that sometimes when we're in that honeymoon phase of in intuitive eating, maybe if your spouse is totally like not on board with you gaining this weight, it's partially because they are afraid that you're not going to be healthy anymore.
Yeah.
And they like like we were discussing, like health is not just what you eat and how much you exercise.
Yes.
And so they're afraid that you're not going to be healthy. So maybe they do want you to look a certain way, but deep down too, like they're kind of afraid that you're going to like die of a heart attack tomorrow, right?
Yeah. And that's where, I mean, that's where the open and honest conversations are important too, in like educating them.
Yes. Yeah.
Telling them about health at every size, telling them the science behind intuitive eating. And, even if, they hear it and they think you're crazy, or it's hard, like it's hard to accept intuitive, or it's hard to accept like health at every size in our culture when we have been so bombarded that like you can only be healthy if you're thin, you
Right.
know? So like it's a like what when you first tell people that, and so they have to kind of experience it. But you can say, hey, husband, like, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm following. And like, hey, I hear it's pretty normal to like gain some weight during this time of intuitive eating, but my weight's going to balance out over this. And just to talk about it, be open. And you know what, even if, they're a little apprehensive, or, I mean, I definitely have, I mean, I can tell you, I've seen the fear on my husband's face of like, oh my gosh, is she going to just like, or like let herself go, like all of those things. But it was like, hey, like, could you just support me in this, and like trust me as I go forward with this? Like, can you just support me as I try it?
Right. Yeah. Support me as I try it. Yeah. And like I'm learning. And I think it's important to point out too that for a lot of us, if not all of us, who have decided to embrace intuitive eating, we've come to a place where we realized that our thoughts were crazy
Yeah.
about dieting and exercise. Like, I mean, I came to the place where That's all I was thinking about. I was mentally tweaking what I was going to eat literally like 3 times a day. And
Yes.
like, it's something, if I tweaked something and I said, well, I must be eating too much peanut butter, that's why I'm not losing weight, I would quit eating peanut butter for 2 days. And if the scale didn't drop, it was like, that can't be it. So now what do I need? I'm going to stop eating so many almonds and dark chocolate. I was eating 85% dark chocolate. Like, oh my gosh. Like, but, there was this constant, like every time I got on the scale in the morning, if it went up 0.2 pounds, it was like, what I'm doing isn't working. What do I need to do? And my entire brain space was thinking about altering my food. And then also, you hear about macros, and I was working out pretty heavily. And so, well, maybe I need to eat a banana before my workout and then amino acids after. But then, if that didn't work 2 days later, it was like, well, maybe I should eat a low carb meal before I work out. I mean, the obsessive thoughts. I didn't have time to be a wife or a mom or a child of God. Like, yeah. I was a person obsessed with looking a certain way. And if we can explain that to our spouse too, like, and I did, I said my husband is really accepting of me at any size, which is really cool. And I didn't even get that and he's always said that to me. I didn't even get that till I was doing intuitive eating for like 6 months. And I'm like, oh, yeah, now I get like he can actually love me at any size.
Yeah.
But I still had that, my husband still was like that, well, what if you're not healthy?
Yes.
Kind of thing. So I did have that piece.
Yes.
We dealt with that a little bit too, but anyways, I'm totally like going off, but
no, I think it's good.
I don't even know what I'm going to say now, but yeah.
Well, I think it's good for people to hear like, hey, this is the conversation like I had with my spouse. Because like sharing, if you have a loving spouse and you share with them, look, this is killing me.
Right. Like, and that's what I said to my husband. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Like when I talked to my husband about this, like at the time I was diagnosed with lupus. That's not what I have, but I was diagnosed with lupus. I was told I have lupus. I went from like powerlifting in the morning and CrossFitting at night, being in grad school, eating this crazy diet and binging like crazy to like, I couldn't grip weights to pick them up. I had zero energy. I couldn't go to the gym. I had this diagnosis. I was like depressed sitting on the couch while he was at the gym with our friends. And I was stressed out about school and feeling like I had lost my identity. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't that girl that was at the gym working out, or what on earth I was doing. And I would drive to Walmart and buy the family size bag of trail mix, and sit in my car and eat it and close it and put it under the seat because I didn't want my husband to see that I was eating it. And then I would decide, like, I would close it, put it under the seat in the car, and I'll just have one more handful. I'll just have one more handful. I'll just have one more. Close it, put it under this. Maybe I'd leave half the bag under the seat and go inside to take a shower or do something. And the whole time I'm in the shower, I'm saying, don't go get the trail mix. I'm going to go get the trail mix. Don't go get the trail mix. I'm going to go get the trail mix. What's wrong with me? Why am I so obsessed with this trail mix? But until like by the end of the night, like I have eaten the entire bag of trail mix. I feel awful. I am physically sick. I am ashamed.
All you've done is think about trail mix for hours. And now you're beating yourself up.
I'm in graduate school and I'm not doing any of my homework because I'm trying not to eat the flippin' trail mix that's in my car. And the enemy the whole time is saying like, wow, look at you. You don't have any self-control or willpower. Like you're studying nutrition and exercise and look at, you can't work out anymore and you're like out of control with your eating. So I think if you can explain that to your husband,
yes,
I don't do this anymore. This is not the life that God has for me. He has not called me to spend hours worrying about trail mix. He has not called me to spend my life trying to shrink my body. He has something more for me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So yes. And yeah, exactly. I think that's so important that we need to talk to our significant other. Like I said, if you're in like a safe, healthy relationship, or, you know, even if it's somewhat strange sometimes, you know, because that's what happens when you're married.
Yes, but that's still safe.
I mean, right. It's still safe. Like that is the kind of stuff. I mean, I remember talking to my husband. I could talk nonstop about intuitive eating when I first found it. And we'd go out on our date night. And I remember sitting at this place called Bakersfield. It's a taco place that's like delicious. And we had been there once before when I was dieting. And then we went there when I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there like, first of all, being like, oh my gosh, I can eat a taco. Like, I almost wanted to cry. Like, I can eat a taco and it doesn't matter. Like, the carbs and the corn tortilla don't matter. And oh my gosh, I'm going to order a margarita. And it's going to be like, and just so yummy. And I had no guilt. But that, I remember that sitting there. I can tell you, like, the table we sat at and like what we were eating. The conversation was me, like, all about intuitive eating.
Yeah.
But I think that was good because I was so excited about it that I did talk about it a lot. And so, and I did share a lot about how, you know, I hadn't shared that before with my husband, that I was constantly tweaking anything in my head. Like that those, I didn't even realize those thoughts were obsessive.
Yeah.
Until I found intuitive eating and I went, oh my gosh, I have spent like the last 20 years of my life making it my life's purpose to change my body. Like, oh my gosh, like and so telling my husband that, yeah, that was a huge key. And maybe that's part of the reason he was more accepting of it too, because I was really open. And I would say too, if you don't feel comfortable, like, can you like journal that then, you know, like, and be like, hey, maybe you just need your husband to read it. Maybe like sometimes for me, like I can write a letter and explain my feelings a lot easier than I can just sitting and talking about it, especially if I think it might get heated.
Yeah.
Like it's much easier to just write out my feelings and just exactly what I'm thinking and not putting it on him.
Yes.
So, you know, that's an option too, but that's really important.
And like some other practical things, like surround yourself with people that are walking this walk.
Yes.
Surround yourself with supportive Christian women. Surround yourself with people that are embracing health at every size and intuitive eating, because both of those things, right? Following Jesus and like learning intuitive eating and saying, I'm not walking with diet culture anymore. Like that is so countercultural. And that is not like what you see in the world. And so you got to find your people.
Yes, exactly.
And you got to walk away from the people that aren't your people.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
You know, follow podcasts, get in social media groups, get a coach, do whatever you need to do to surround yourself with the word, with intuitive eating, with health at every size principles, so that that's what you're seeing, that's what you're consuming, that's what you're learning, and get that support there.
Yes.
Because, you know, you might not, maybe your spouse will say like, okay, go for it, but they don't want to talk about it and they don't want to be on board either. I mean, that's pretty much kind of my experience. I mean, my husband was like, praise Jesus, we can eat dairy again, and things like that.
Yes.
But he didn't really want to like learn intuitive eating with me and practice all of those things, you know? And so he still struggles in some areas. And we kind of, you know, we just kind of talk about that and work through that. Like he wishes I wouldn't have some things in the house because he doesn't want to eat them. And I'm like, look, I have them and I'm good with that. So we still have to navigate those kinds of things. But let me tell you, I have so many people in my life that I talk to about all of this stuff. I've surrounded myself with supportive women to walk with in faith. You know, anything that I can do to keep going this path.
Yes.
Because absolutely. if you're not having that around you all of the time, it's very easy to get caught back up in diet culture and all of that stuff. So it's like you got to go through a lot of things and like unfollow, unsubscribe, anything that's making you feel bad about yourself, that's making you think you should diet, that's making you think you're not enough, and follow, subscribe, all of the things that, you know, are supportive.
Exactly. And I'm just going to wrap it up with this then, and that's exactly why I created the intuitive eating support group for Christian women. Like it wasn't because I wanted to isolate women who, I don't want to tell people who aren't Christian about intuitive eating. It's just that it's a really different journey. Yeah. I think for somebody who is a Christian woman, and there are a lot of great intuitive eating groups out there that are for everybody, absolutely. But I really wanted like a space where Christian women could connect and talk about the issues that are unique in our faith with intuitive eating, just like everything we've talked about. You can't talk about that in a regular intuitive eating group. I'm not going to bring out the Bible. And I asked a question one time about does anybody know of a Christian registered dietitian? I asked that in a regular intuitive eating group, and I got slammed, why do you need a Christian one? So I created this group. And I'm linking that in the description on this video. The other thing is Char-Lee has a really great blog, and she has an email list you can sign up for where she sends really good emails. So I would encourage you to sign up for her email list too. And if you're not in our group, to join our group. And Char-Lee is in that group as well, and she likes to chime in every so often when she has the opportunity, but she's busy working on her own stuff as well. But and she also takes clients on, you take clients in person as a dietitian, and also online, correct?
Yeah. And I actually, so everything I do is faith-based, and I just wanted to hit on, it's the same thing that, you just said, I kind of started this, I was going to start an intuitive eating practice as a dietitian, and I quickly was like, well, I don't know how to do this without my faith, because that's what, this whole thing, I just dug into scripture in the Bible, because that's what gives me the strength, and that's what moves me forward. So yeah, I just launched my faith-based intuitive eating online course and coach clients, and so
I'll link to that in the description for this video too, but her website, and then link to her coaching if that's something that you need as well. But Char-Lee, it has been really awesome talking with you. I have really appreciated this, and I think that the women who are watching this are really, really going to appreciate it too. So
I really appreciate the opportunity. Good chatting with you.
Yeah, so we'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.